Hi, folks. My name is Jason Ray. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Paperless Parts. This is Cutting Through the Noise, where we try to get to the heart of the matter in talking with folks who are on the ground, know what's going on. We've had several episodes with folks from my team. Now we're inviting Bill Berrien to the conversation. Bill, do me a favor. Please introduce yourself.
Jason, thank you for having me. Bill Berrien here. I 13 years ago acquired a contract machining company, Pindel Global Precision. We make parts for global OEMs across the globe. And in 2020, we incubated another brand business, Liberty Precision, to specifically go after space, aerospace, defense, and munitions. And great to be here chatting about this great world of advanced manufacturing.
So, Bill, you're on the front lines here, and going after aerospace and defense ties pretty nicely to your background as well. So, got really good context in all of this. It's one of the reasons I was really excited to chat with you because I tend to find that we're hearing a lot in the news.
Hmm.
You have a lot of different signal around tariffs, you have reshoring, you have automation, you have discussions around skills gap, 2.1 million gap by 2030. And then you have other stats that are coming out and saying things like, well, of the 12.1 million people in manufacturing, that continues to be flat. So we're not adding more headcount. So I think my big question and my goal, I think, for today's conversation is just like, how do we demystify this a little bit for folks that are just like hitting the headlines every morning and saying, I wonder what's going on? Like, is manufacturing coming back to the US? Are you seeing that? What are you guys seeing on the ground right now?
Great. Jason, great question. Um, well, first of all, a belief that we need to get manufacturing back here. We need to embrace and extend that culture of making things, and it's critical. And we made some poor decisions as a country, business and government, and everyone. The past 20 years, we about seeing other parts of the world as the manufacturing powerhouses, and we were going to just design things. But it is strategically important, it is tactically important that we have a culture here of making things. So number one, that needs to happen. We are seeing increased quoting, increased orders for our business, which is making parts, contract machining for larger OEMs. We are seeing, this year largely some softer industrial demand from our legacy customers, but we are seeing new customers that make or source parts overseas looking to bring them back. Amidst all that, we are seeing a lot of strength around defense world, munitions world, aerospace world. Those are almost by definition parts that can't be sourced outside of the country. So you got a nice moat there, so to speak, which is great. And we're only seeing, in the news and other places, more demand for that. So, yeah, I am optimistic. But the key point is manufacturing is not going to come back in the form that it left. It left as often lower skill, or let's just say more people intensive, hands-on value add. And whether it was lower skill value add or even higher skill, they were just getting pulled into the hands-on piece too much. And it's not going to come back the way it left. It's going to come back as highly automated, ideally utilize the automation utilized very heavily, and it's going to be enabled by a highly trained, highly paid team, which is a good thing. And while you say manufacturing head count has not been growing, I would encourage us to look at the details behind wage growth, because
Yeah.
that's really the journey. I mean, we have a flattening population, immigration, not having many babies, all of that. So I don't think the goal is job growth. I think the goal is wage growth and wages
Yeah.
being driven by higher value add on the part of employees. Now, it speaks to upskilling. It speaks to more early career training. But again, that I'm a big passionate advocate for lifelong upskilling. Focusing on that incumbent workforce, 25 to 75. How do you give them the extra skills to create more value and to capture more value?
Yeah, Bill, I could not agree more. We have this unique opportunity where I get to speak with a lot of the supply chain leaders at the large OEMs. And one of the narratives that's been they'd be beating the fist on the ground and saying, hey, or on the table saying, hey, we need a resilient supply chain. We need supply chain resiliency. That seems to be the new flavor of the week.
Yep.
And I think COVID was the first domino that really started to make people think about that supply chain resiliency because it decimated the supply chains. But the message that I keep going back to them with is the most resilient supply chain is a profitable one.
Mm-hmm.
And a
Absolutely.
profitable supply chain can afford to pay their people, and they're not losing people to going and driving for Amazon because the wage is the same to be a delivery person as it is to sit behind a machine and run a $500,000 piece of equipment. And
Yep.
so I could not agree more with that message. And so would you say that this narrative of work leaves the United States due to cheap labor abroad is probably not it's not val it was probably valid 25 years ago, but do you think that's still the case today, or are we just a little bit behind the curve when it comes to adoption or maybe even just utilization of the tech that we have?
Yeah, I think low value added work left for that reason,
Yeah.
that it was just a low wage country can pay less for low value added work. The future is about you know automation enabled, AI enabled, technology and process enabled, high value added work that an individual somehow enabled by those different technologies and different process understandings, can create more value. And that's, I look at my journey here at Pindel. I acquired the company was founded in 1947. When I acquired it in 2012, most of the parts were made in multiple operations. So the way prior leadership had their strategy, and it was before a bunch of technology came online. Their strategy was to make machines into cells, have a person moving a part across multiple operations, trying to get those efficiencies, all of that. And our journey has been, since my ownership, has been investing in technology, whether it is CNC technology, whether it is mechanical technology still going on older machines, and training the team we already had to master that technology. And that has allowed them, each individual, to create more value and in turn to capture more value. And over 10 years, to see those closest to the automation doubling, if not tripling their wage, validates that idea. They are worth every penny for that increased wage that they are earning, because they are creating far beyond that in the amount of value enabled by this by this technology. And that's,
Love it.
I think that's going to be that's the holy land for the U.S. It's going to be high levels of automation, highly utilized, and made so by a highly trained, highly paid team will, allow us to make parts below the cost of low wage countries, leading the U.S. to be the manufacturing powerhouse to the world.
Yeah, and I think the differentiator here, especially because at the end of the day, I look at a lot of these countries that are producing the low value add parts.
Mm-hmm.
They are now doing that in a very automated way. So you're seeing
Mm-hmm.
less and less people involved in the production of
Yes.
the low value parts, which tells me now it just comes back to CapEx and adoption of technology
Yep.
that makes it possible to produce that anywhere. And I think that's also why you might be seeing a little bit more of the foreign direct investment in the US because they're saying, yeah, we can set up a facility there. It's automated here, it can be automated there. And yeah, it looks really good on paper, but how many jobs does it bring? We'll have to wait and see. And so,
Well, and I think
yeah,
the jobs that it does bring, there's going to be, and there is a premium on critical thinking skills, root causing skills, uh, process improvement skills, because that one person now can be running, in our case, 3 or 4 CNC Swiss machines that
yeah.
are each making very complex parts, and it's incumbent on the person to understand, you know, deviations in the output. What's the root cause? Is it tooling? Is it lubricants? What's the process fix? And in turn, around maintenance teams, others having that understanding of much more complex technology, how to fix it, and ideally how to prevent it from breaking in the first place. So it's really that pulling on um, a more that training that we want to give our team.
It seems like there's a mindset that goes along with this as well. Like I walk around IMTS and
Mhm.
I walk around with, I see our customers and I see other folks that we know in the industry. And I find that most folks are buying the same tech, like really, really high tech equipment.
Yep.
And then I'll go into two different shops, and I mean, it's night and day. It's kind of like software. Some people buy the software and they use 10% of the functionality. And other
Um,
people buy the software and they take the time and they lean in. And I find it so interesting because in this industry specifically, when we get to experience this, I find that the evaluations of the tech are so much more deliberate. So figuring out what does it do, what features doesn't it have, what is it going to miss out on? Then once the purchase has been made, capturing the 80% that it does do. That's
mhm.
the I think going to be the critical piece for us is the United States take advantage of the technology that you buy.
Right.
You
Right.
don't buy the machine and then only use it for one function. I'm like, wait a second, like what are we doing here? Like
Right.
and this was our, we set up the user conference power, but this was what it was all about. It's like every piece of technology is effectively a Ferrari. It's up
Yeah.
to your team what gear you drive it in. Like,
Totally.
and I think you've taken very specific approach to upskilling that team. What's that? What's that initiative? How are you thinking about that on an outside of your team perspective? What's that look like?
I'll be honest. I think success starts before the upskilling, and it has to go back to, team and culture design because and so, sort of a very basic personality trait, and it's how much ego is in play here. Because those who have ego wrapped around what their prior role looked like, what they did on a day-to-day basis, hour to hour, minute to minute, and they do not if they do not have a growth mindset, if they do not have a curiosity, um, and a way and a willingness to think differently again about what they do minute to minute and see they need to see technology as an enabler. They need to see it as freeing up their time and not be concerned with how they did things in the past, because otherwise you do fall into exactly what you talk about, that you implement that new technology and the person wants to figure out how that new technology can allow them to do exactly what they were doing before. And they only utilize then, 10% of the features instead of the other, 80 to 90% of the features. So it really goes back before that. And one of our mottos here at Pindel is hire for attitude, train for skill.
Yeah.
So, how do you start with the attitude and that willingness to learn, the willingness to invest in themselves, the willingness to have the company invest in them, to start with that, and then train to the skill, and can be trained to the current skill, or it can be trained to that new skill that is going to be critical. Because when you buy a CAM software that has or an upgrade module to your current CAM software that is going to liberate that programmer from a whole bunch of repetitive low-level tasks, they have to be willing to let those low-level tasks go and not define their day as an execution of you know those low-level tasks. And they have to have that hunger to be able to learn and then to do more.
Yeah.
Um,
That cultural element sounds it's that is such a key from what we've seen. And you've been in this industry longer than I have, but looking at it from the most successful companies, there is this understanding that everyone is trying to do the right thing and that by automating your job doesn't mean you lose it.
right.
And I,
No.
and I think that there's this like inherent PTSD around leveraging automation where it's like, wait a second, the second we move away from, manual machines to CNC machines, people lose their jobs. And
No.
I I don't think I really don't think that's the case. In lifestyle businesses, maybe. But I think this industry is changing so dramatically with the amount of private equity flowing into acquiring shops. I think tens of thousands of small, fragmented mom and pop shops, that is changing. And I think that will continue to change right up to about 2030 when that will no longer be the perception of the industry.
Correct. No, I totally agree with you there. Um, you need automation to be your fuel to grow. You need to create a sales constrained world where you have digested the operations you have, and because you've invested in the technology, the people, you have created capacity that is getting underserved. It could use more sales, and that's the world that you want to get to. And honestly, revenue per employee is probably the best metric. We should be shooting for, because increased revenue per employee means increased wage per employee. It's that simple. But you're not going to be successful if you implement all this automation, uh, and you don't use it as a vehicle to grow the business. Unless you find different areas for people to do, and then if you don't, you're upsetting your culture. I mean, we have never let anyone go because we automated their area. You use it as fuel to grow,
Yeah.
and that does need to be the culture. So if anything in the future model that you put out there, uh, those smaller shops that are on the edge of implementing technology and automation and all that, what they really need to be thinking about is how do they see more customers? How do they quote more customers? How do they quote faster? How do they increase their time at bat so that they can grow? Because if they're not looking at the growth side, the sales side, quoting and all that, then they are going to run into a brick wall, and they're going to end up not investing in the technology. You're going to end up with lower wage, lower skill stuff, and you're in your death spiral there.
Yeah, it's so interesting. One of the things that I've always been amazed at is the lack of supply and demand based pricing that
Hmm.
that we see when we initially talk to customers. And you try to explain like you cannot keep putting work out onto your shop floor to a point of where you're bursting at the seams without increasing your margins on that because you need the ability to reinvest in the business.
Right.
And I just think it's such a critical point where you end up in these really bad situations where a shop is either too full or they're too empty and they don't have the revenue to keep their people. And yeah, I think there's definitely a balance there, and it all comes back to intentionality in that sales and estimating process. So
Yeah, and from the leadership side, honestly, a continuous review of customer and part level profitability and a
yeah,
willingness, a courage to say a customer is not a profitable customer and you are going to raise their prices to turn them into a profitable customer, or they're going to go find, or you're going to somehow need to force them to either pay more or go find a vendor, that's a supplier that's more suited to their model. And the same with parts. you know
yeah,
there is no such thing as we take the good and we take the bad. Don't take the
yes.
bad. Just don't take the bad. Reprice that, let it go, um, and have courage in your operations, in your quality system, in your production, that you're not going to lose the good parts. Uh, because that's a fool's errand to say we're going to take low or negative margin parts to keep the high margin parts.
Yeah, a little bit of myth busting here. And in the vein of cutting through the noise, there's this constant narrative of buyers want us to make mistakes, underprice parts so that they can get better pricing and they can reduce their costs and reduce their spend. Or buyers are intentionally, opaque in what they're
Mhm.
trying to buy, or they're, not sending us 3D CAD models because they don't want us to be able to understand the full complexity of a job. So we under all that. I will just say, and I would be happy to discuss this with anybody. I don't buy that narrative at all. Every buyer I've talked to, they do not want their supply chain partners losing money on parts.
Yep.
They really don't. Like there
Yep.
is no good long-term strategy there. That is not a winning outcome. It actually produces more RMAs, escapes, problems in the quality and the on-time delivery. It reduces the stability of the supply chain. It's the antithesis of supply chain readiness. So piling on what you're saying, I think it is just an enormous mistake that people make where they try to underbid some and to win more and kind of like take the losers with the winners. No, there should not be a concept of winners and losers. We have this term that we use in software called ICP, which is our
Mm.
ideal customer profile. And
Yep.
when I talk to our customers or when I talk to shop owners out there, I talk about ideal part profile. What is the ideal part for your shop? My
Mhm.
co-founder Jay used to call it the gravy work. What's the
Yep.
work that just flows through your shop? It is profitable. You can get the materials. Your people like working in it. They understand how to make it sing. And at the end of the day, that is your bullseye.
Yep.
Now, we at Paperless Park, we have a non-ICP process. So
Okay.
will we look at a non-ideal customer for us when people come in and they're doing printed circuit boards and gaskets and castings and forgings and all kinds of different manufacturing processes? People find us and they come in and they say, we want this, we need this.
Yep.
Well, fine, but we apply a lot more work up front to ensure that it's going to be profitable. It's not going to sink. It's not going to be a failure for the customer. I'd rather
Yep.
tell a customer no and have them respect us for that
Yep.
than go waste 2 years of their time
Yep.
trying to get them to something successful because I'm just like taking the work as it comes. And that hand to mouth approach is just not successful at all. And it takes a lot of discipline. I can tell you, early years did not have it.
Yep.
Not have
Yep. No, I couldn't agree more. When I first acquired Pindel, um, we had fewer customers and a greater breadth of their machine part needs, which meant you had, you know, stuff that was way too low volume for what our equipment was being was our equipment and processes our team was optimized for. And we figured out, we are our sweet spot is complex turn parts less than 3 inches diameter in volumes of 10,000 to a million. And once you have those parameters, it is so powerful to be able to say no and
And it's
just
liberating. It's got to be so
it's
liberating. You
liberating.
don't have
It's
to think
liberating.
about it. You don't have to
Yep.
think about it all day.
Including for your at that point existing portfolio, and uh, understand what you are good at, because as much as you might think what we're good at is the relationship with that customer, and that's our secret sauce. No, that is not a sustainable advantage, and that buyer is going to swap out that company ownership, whatever it is, and but more importantly, that's forcing you to do parts that are well outside your sweet spot, and that's a prescription for frustration and loss.
I see it all the time where customers are going out and they're buying very specialized equipment to produce a part that they otherwise would not be able to make for one of their customers.
Yep.
And I think there are some really good scenarios where it makes sense to do that. But the number of times I see that piece of equipment then sit there unutilized because the one job that was going to pay for the piece of equipment is now gone through, and now what? Sell the thing, get rid of it. I mean, I think when we first started in this space, that was wire EDMs. It just was.
Yep.
Every single shop had a wire EDM. They had all bought it for X job that they remembered, and now the thing is like, might as well be a fishbowl. I
Yep.
mean, it's literally doing nothing on the shop floor, eating up
Yep.
space. No one really knows how to run it well.
Yep.
It's discipline, discipline, discipline. I just think it is the key. Narrow that bullseye for your ideal customer profile, your ideal part profile.
Yep. 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 Couldn't agree more.
So so we're gonna wrap up here.
Yep.
I'll leave it with this. You see it on the front lines, you hear it in the news. Anything that you want to share with the folks listening that you may be hearing and you're just like, you know what? That's just not the case. It's not, that's not the reality of what's going on today in manufacturing. And if the
Well,
answer is no, that's great.
yeah, I mean, I think you still have perception problems, perception challenges for the industry that, 30 years ago, manufacturing used to be dark, dirty, dangerous, and dull. But the reality in advanced manufacturing is no, it is smart, safe, sustainable, and sexy. And yet, parents don't fully realize that. Uh, High schoolers don't realize that. But also, you know, 30, 40, 50-year olds don't realize that. And in this world of, changing technology, changing industry needs, people need to always be looking where, you do a heads up of look at where are the higher value added opportunities, and and be considering manufacturing. And with that, it's incumbent on manufacturers to somehow open their doors to the world, whether it is through social media, through newsletters, showcasing your operations, highlighting employees, what their personal and life journeys have been, uh, having manufacturing days, all of that, because that perception can be, really negative and really, really challenging. And yet, again, to see as we have had, numerous folks on the team who have been willing for us to invest in them, invest in themselves, embrace the technology, create more value. And again, those closest to the automation, seeing their wage double, if not triple over 10 years is powerful. I mean, that is the exponential economy as much as Moore's Law is. Moore's Law is just, doubling in chip power over 18 months, but a doubling in wage over 10 years that's still an exponential gain because we need to have a society structure, an industry structure to allow those individuals to double again in the next 10 years and maybe double again 10 years after that, depending on the length of their careers. So yeah, I guess if I had to um, leave one message, it would be we seem to live under this fallacy, this mistaken belief as a society that what you learn in the first 25 years of life is going to last you for the rest of your life, for the next 50 years of your life. That might have been the case when, you know, 80 years ago, working lives went to like age 40, 45. Yeah. And what you learned in high school and maybe a few years of college was going to have to carry you through that shortened working life. But today, technologies change, we're living longer, personal interests change, all of that. We need to be figuring out how, as a society, to support businesses, and especially small and medium sized businesses, in continuously upskilling their employees. I did a ChatGPT search on the upskilling initiatives that Singapore offers their their whole citizenry, and it is astounding. I mean, the incumbent workforce, early career workforce, personal upskilling wallets that they have, all of these mechanisms that honestly create a culture. I think it's called future skills, all one word. It's all about how society can support individuals and encourage businesses to invest in individuals lifelong. So I'll sort of leave you with that, but we've got to be thinking about different models, or we are going to get slapped upside the head when not just automation accelerates, but AI starts to move the cheese on increasingly broader swaths of the population.
Yeah, Bill, that's awesome. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me today. Thanks
Jason,
for
thank
sharing
you.
this. Thanks for helping folks understand the reality of what's going on in manufacturing. And I think the future is going to be very bright. So
Awesome. I do too.
quite
I do
excited.
too. We got to be
Thank
embracing
you.
it, just like you are.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Jason.